The cafe on Station Omega 7 buzzed with the usual chatter of traders, miners, and off-duty military personnel. Commander Sarah Chen sat in the corner booth, her civilian clothes deliberately unremarkable. Faded jacket, worn boots, nothing that would draw attention. She preferred it this way. After 3 decades of military service, blending into crowds had become second nature. A group of young pilots occupied the table next to hers, their voices carrying the excitement of fresh academy graduates. Sarah stirred her coffee and listened without meaning to, recognizing the eager anticipation she once felt before her first deployment. "Did you hear about the Kepler incident?" one of them said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "They say Phantom took out an entire Zarathi battlecruiser single-handedly." Sarah's hand paused mid-stir. That call sign hadn't been spoken in her presence for months. "Phantom's just a legend," another pilot scoffed. "No one's that good. The stories get bigger every time someone tells them. My instructor knew someone who served with Phantom," the first pilot insisted. "Said they never saw the pilot's face, never knew their real name. But when things got desperate, when the odds were impossible, Phantom would appear on the comms and somehow pull everyone through." Sarah's reflection caught in the cafe window. Graying hair, laugh lines, scars hidden beneath her sleeve. The woman in the glass looked nothing like the terror of space that had earned the call sign Phantom. That was exactly how she wanted it. She remembered her first tour, fresh out of the academy like these kids. The Zarathi had been expanding aggressively, consuming human colonies like a plague across the outer rim. Earth's military was outgunned, outmanned, and losing ground every month. Young pilots were dying faster than they could be replaced. The breakthrough came during the Battle of Proxima Station. Sarah had been flying routine patrol when distress signals flooded the communication channels. A Zarathi strike force had overwhelmed the station's defenses. The evacuation was failing and civilian transports were sitting ducks. Standard protocol dictated waiting for reinforcements, but Sarah saw the plasma cannon charging for another salvo at the refugee ships. She disabled her transponder, switched to an encrypted frequency, and called herself Phantom to avoid formal identification. What happened next changed everything. Using the asteroid field as cover, she executed a series of precision strikes that shouldn't have been possible with a single fighter. The Zarathi, confused by the hit-and-run tactics and unable to track her signature, began firing at shadows. Their formation scattered, giving the human fleet time to regroup. Phantom vanished as quickly as they had appeared, but 40,000 civilians lived because of those crucial minutes. The young pilots at the next table were now debating whether Phantom was even human. Sarah smiled despite herself. She'd heard that theory before, along with speculation about alien allies, secret super soldiers, and experimental AI systems. The truth was simpler and somehow more profound. Sarah had discovered something during that first battle. When she fought without the burden of identity, without the fear of failure attached to her name, she became something more than herself. The call sign freed her from hesitation, from the weight of expectation. "Excuse me," one of the young pilots had approached her table. "I'm sorry to bother you, but you look familiar." "Have we met?" Sarah looked up with practiced casualness. "I don't think so. I work in station logistics. Pretty forgettable job." The pilot studied her face for another moment, then shrugged. "Must be mistaken. Have a good day." As he returned to his friends, Sarah gathered her things. The Zarathi threat had been neutralized 3 years ago, but new conflicts were always brewing. Pirates in the Vega sector, territorial disputes in the outer colonies, rumors of something stirring beyond the galactic rim. She walked through the station corridors, observing the mix of species that now called human space home. Former enemies traded alongside old allies. The galaxy was messier than the clean victories recorded in history books, but it was alive and growing. Her personal communicator chimed with an encrypted message. Admiral Torres, one of the few people who knew Phantom's true identity, was requesting a meeting. Sarah deleted the message without reading the details. She already knew what it would say. Somewhere in human space there was a crisis that conventional forces couldn't handle. Somewhere desperate people needed a miracle. Somewhere the impossible needed to become possible. Sarah Chen would remain invisible in the crowd, living her quiet life among the ordinary citizens she'd spent her career protecting. But when the moment came, when hope seemed lost and the darkness pressed in from all sides, a different voice would crackle across the communication channels. A ghost with a call sign that had become legend would remind everyone that humans didn't surrender. didn't yield and never stopped fighting for what mattered. The cafe grew smaller behind her as she walked deeper into the station. Tomorrow she might be gardening in her small apartment, reading history books or watching stars through the observation deck. But tonight, she needed to check her flight suit and make sure her fighter was ready. Because even in retirement, even when the galaxy seemed peaceful, Sarah Chen knew better than to assume the fight was over. Heroes might fade into crowds, but legends lived forever in the hearts of those who needed them most. And sometimes, when the universe demanded it, legends answered the call. 3 weeks after the cafe encounter, Sarah's peaceful routine shattered with a priority transmission that bypassed all standard channels. The holographic display in her apartment flickered to life, revealing Admiral Torres's weathered face marked by fresh stress lines. "Sarah, I know you're officially retired, but we have a situation in the Vega sector that's spiraling beyond our control." Torres's voice carried the weight of desperation. "The Crimson Fleet has established a stronghold in the asteroid belt. They're not just pirates anymore. Intelligence suggests they've acquired military-grade weaponry from unknown sources." Sarah listened while preparing her morning coffee, maintaining the facade of civilian normalcy even though her mind was already calculating flight paths and tactical scenarios. 17 cargo vessels have disappeared in the past month, Torres continued. The trade routes to the outer colonies are effectively severed. We've lost contact with 3 patrol squadrons sent to investigate. Senator Harrison's daughter was aboard the luxury liner Celestial Dream when it vanished 2 days ago. The transmission paused as Torres consulted his notes. The political pressure is enormous. Earth Command wants a full fleet response, but our intelligence is limited. We're flying blind into what could be a massacre. Sarah set down her coffee cup. She'd heard whispers about the Crimson Fleet during her station wanderings. Former military pilots turned mercenary, led by someone called the Red Baron. The name was theatrical, but the threat was real. "I'm sending you the tactical briefing," Torres said. "If you decide to investigate, you'll have full discretionary authority." "But Sarah, this isn't like the old days. These aren't alien invaders following predictable patterns. These are humans who know our tactics, our weaknesses." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of decision. Through her apartment window, she watched civilian ships dock at the station, families relocating to safer sectors, traders altering routes to avoid the Vega passage, young couples planning weddings that might never happen if the pirate threat expanded. The tactical briefing painted a grim picture. The Crimson Fleet had transformed a hollow asteroid into a fortress, complete with shield generators and defense platforms. Their fighter complement exceeded 200 vessels, many piloted by deserters from various military forces. The Red Baron himself remained a mystery. No confirmed identity, no clear motivation beyond profit and destruction. Sarah accessed the secure channel Admiral Torres had provided and began reviewing personnel files. The missing patrol squadrons included some of the finest pilots in the fleet. If they couldn't penetrate the asteroid fortress, conventional assault would require overwhelming force and acceptable losses that weren't actually acceptable. She opened her closet and removed the sealed container hidden behind winter clothes. Inside lay her flight suit, unmarked and unremarkable except for the small modifications she'd made to the communication system years ago. A secondary transponder that could broadcast on frequencies most scanners couldn't detect. That evening, Sarah submitted a request for temporary civilian transport to the Vega sector, claiming interest in asteroid mining opportunities. The bureaucratic process would take days, providing perfect cover for her real mission. Her fighter waited in a private hangar, registered under a shell company she'd established during her final year of service. The ship itself was unremarkable. A modified interceptor with enhanced engines and shielding, nothing that would stand out in a standard patrol group. But the real modifications were hidden deeper. Improved targeting systems acquired through quiet channels, experimental stealth plating that bent sensor readings, and most importantly, the communication array that had made Phantom's legend possible. As Sarah ran pre-flight diagnostics, her mind drifted to the young pilots she'd overheard in the cafe. Some of them might be among the missing squadrons, trapped in the asteroid fortress or worse. The thought crystallized her resolve. She launched under cover of a supply convoy heading to the Vega mining stations, her ship's signature masked among the larger vessels. Once clear of Station Omega-7's sensor range, she broke formation and adjusted course for the asteroid belt. The journey to Vega would take 18 hours at optimal speed. Sarah used the time to study the tactical data, looking for patterns in the Crimson Fleet's attacks, weaknesses in their fortress design, anything that might provide an advantage. The missing ships had all been taken in the same region, a narrow passage between two large asteroids that served as the main trade route. Pirates typically favored quick strikes and rapid retreats, but the Crimson Fleet was establishing permanent presence. Someone was thinking strategically. As Sarah's ship approached the Vega system's edge, she detected the first signs of trouble. Debris fields where merchant vessels had met their end, scattered emergency beacons broadcasting automated distress calls to empty space. The pirates weren't just stealing cargo, they were sending a message. She activated the stealth plating and switched to passive sensors only. Ahead lay the asteroid belt where legends would either be born or buried. Sarah Chen might enter that field as a retired officer on an unauthorized mission. But if the situation demanded it, Phantom would emerge from the shadows once again. The communication array hummed to life as Sarah prepared the encrypted frequencies. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, human pilots might be fighting for their lives, waiting for a miracle they didn't even know was coming. The stars stretched endlessly beyond her cockpit, but Sarah's focus narrowed to the immediate challenge. The Crimson Fleet had made a critical mistake. They'd threatened innocence in human space. That was a line no one crossed without consequences. Time to remind them why. Sarah's ship drifted silently through the outer edge of the asteroid field, sensors painting a detailed picture of the Crimson Fleet's operation. What she discovered exceeded even the military's worst projections. The pirates hadn't simply occupied a few asteroids, they'd created a sprawling complex that rivaled major military installations. Defense platforms nestled between rotating rocks, their weapon arrays tracking in coordinated patterns. Fighter patrols moved in disciplined formations that spoke of professional training rather than chaotic piracy. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah spotted something that made her blood run cold. A makeshift prison complex had been carved into one of the larger asteroids, its transparent aluminum viewports revealing cramped cells. The missing patrol pilots weren't dead, they were being held captive. The tactical implications hit her immediately. The Red Baron wasn't just stealing ships and cargo. He was collecting skilled pilots, potentially forcing them to join his fleet or extracting military intelligence through interrogation. Every day, the prisoners remained captive, weakened human space's defensive capabilities. Sarah maneuvered closer, using the natural rotation of asteroids to mask her approach. Her modified sensors picked up communication chatter that revealed the scope of the operation. Supply runs from unknown benefactors, recruitment drives targeting disaffected military personnel, and most disturbing of all, references to a greater purpose beyond simple piracy. The Red Baron himself remained elusive. His communications filtered through multiple relays that made identification impossible. But his strategic thinking was evident in every aspect of the fortress design. This wasn't the work of a common criminal. Someone with serious military experience was orchestrating the Crimson Fleet's activities. As Sarah prepared to withdraw and report her findings, her sensors detected an incoming convoy. 3 civilian freighters escorted by a single patrol vessel approached the main trade route, completely unaware of the trap waiting ahead. The lead ship's transponder identified it as the merchant vessel New Horizon, carrying agricultural supplies to the outer colonies. Sarah faced an impossible choice. Revealing herself to warn the convoy would compromise her reconnaissance mission and alert the pirates to her presence, but allowing innocent civilians to fall into the Red Baron's hands violated every principle she'd sworn to uphold. The decision crystallized as the Crimson Fleet's fighters began launching from hidden positions throughout the asteroid field. 12 ships moving to intercept the convoy, with overwhelming firepower advantage. The patrol escort wouldn't stand a chance. Sarah activated her ship's combat systems and switched to the encrypted Phantom frequency. Her voice, electronically masked and transmitted on multiple channels, cut through the communication spectrum like a blade. Convoy New Horizon, this is Phantom. You are flying into a trap. All ships execute emergency dispersal pattern Delta 7 immediately. The convoy's response was immediate confusion. The patrol escort's captain demanded identification while the freighter captains argued about changing course. Precious seconds ticked away as the pirate fighters closed distance. Phantom confirms active pirate presence in your flight path, Sarah transmitted, already accelerating toward the intercept zone. 12 hostile fighters approaching from asteroid shadow. Execute evasive maneuvers now. The convoy finally began scattering as the first pirate ships appeared on their sensors, but the freighters were too slow, too massive to escape the closing trap. The patrol escort, heavily outgunned, positioned itself between the pirates and the fleeing civilians. Sarah's fighter erupted from the asteroid field like an avenging spirit, her first salvo destroying 2 pirate ships before they realized they faced an additional threat. The surprise gave the convoy precious time to increase the distance, but 11 fighters remained operational and furious. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself," the pirate squadron leader demanded. "You are interfering with Crimson Fleet operations." Sarah's response came in the form of a precision strike that crippled the squadron leader's engines without destroying the ship. She wanted prisoners who could provide intelligence, not martyrs who would take their secrets to the grave. The dogfight that followed showcased why Phantom had become legend. Sarah's ship danced between asteroids with impossible grace, using the complex gravitational fields and rocky obstacles to her advantage. Her enemies found themselves firing at shadows while her return shots found their marks with surgical precision. But numbers began telling as more pirate reinforcements launched from the hidden base. Sarah's ship took hits despite her evasive maneuvers, warning lights flickering across her control panels. The convoy was escaping, but at the cost of revealing her presence to the entire Crimson Fleet. "Attention, unknown pilot." A new voice cut through the communication channels, carrying authority that marked it as the Red Baron himself. "Your flying style is impressive but futile. Surrender now, and I may find a place for you in my organization." Sarah's response was another impossible maneuver that allowed her to escape the closing net of fighters. As she accelerated toward the edge of the asteroid field, the Red Baron's laughter echoed across the frequencies. "I know who you are, Phantom," he said, the electronic masking unable to hide his satisfaction. "The famous ghost pilot who haunts human space. But legends can die just like anyone else. I look forward to our next encounter." Sarah's ship cleared, the asteroid field with minimal power remaining, and multiple system failures requiring immediate attention. Behind her, the Crimson Fleet's fighters formed up in precise formations, no longer hiding their capabilities. The Red Baron had dropped all pretense. This was no longer simple piracy, but open warfare against human civilian shipping. As she began emergency repairs while drifting in open space, Sarah realized the true scope of the challenge ahead. The Red Baron knew military tactics, understood human psychology, and commanded resources that suggested backing from major powers. Worse, he'd recognized her flying style despite her electronic masking. The successful rescue of the New Horizon convoy would send a message throughout human space. Phantom still protected the innocent, but it had also announced her presence to an enemy who seemed to know exactly who she was and what she represented. Sarah patched the most critical system failures and began the long journey back to Station Omega-7. Admiral Torres needed to know that the Vega crisis was bigger than anyone suspected, and she needed to prepare for a confrontation with an opponent who combined professional competence with personal knowledge of her capabilities. The Red Baron had made it personal. That would prove to be his greatest mistake. Sarah's damaged fighter limped into Station Omega-7's emergency bay 3 days after the convoy rescue. The maintenance crews who examined her ship found evidence of combat that shouldn't have been possible. Precision laser burns that indicated engagement with military-grade weapons. Impact damage from explosive rounds and sensor ghosts suggesting her ship had somehow avoided multiple missile locks. Admiral Torres arrived while Sarah was still in the medical bay, submitting to routine post-combat examination. The doctor found elevated stress indicators and minor radiation exposure, consistent with prolonged spaceflight, but nothing that would prevent immediate return to duty. The New Horizon convoy reached port safely, Torres reported as they walked to his secure office. Captain Martinez credits an unknown pilot calling themselves Phantom with saving 47 civilian lives. Interesting coincidence. Sarah maintained her expression of polite confusion. "I heard about the rescue on the news feeds. Fortunate that someone was in the area to help." Torres activated a privacy shield and leaned back in his chair. "Sarah, we've known each other for 15 years. I was your commanding officer during the Zarathi campaigns. I know exactly what you're capable of, and I know what the galaxy owes to Phantom's interventions." The admission hung in the air between them. Sarah had always suspected Torres knew her secret, but hearing it spoken aloud changed the dynamic of their relationship. "The intelligence you gathered changes everything," Torres continued, activating a holographic display. "The Crimson Fleet isn't just well-equipped. They're operating with knowledge of our patrol schedules, our convoy routes, our communication protocols. Someone with high-level access is feeding them information." Sarah studied the tactical data Torres presented. The pattern of attack showed intimate knowledge of military operations that went beyond simple observation. Ships had been ambushed at coordinates known only to Fleet Command. Patrol routes had been compromised before they were officially transmitted. The Red Baron had a source inside Earth's military hierarchy. "There's more," Torres said grimly. "We've identified the Red Baron. His real name is Marcus Webb, former lieutenant colonel in the Zarathi campaign. He served under General Harrison, Senator Harrison's father, before being cashiered for unauthorized weapons testing on civilian populations." The revelation struck Sarah like a physical blow. She remembered Marcus Webb, remembered the brilliant tactical mind that had helped win crucial battles against the Zarathi. She also remembered the growing obsession with experimental weapons, the willingness to sacrifice anything for victory, the court-martial that ended his career in disgrace. Webb disappeared after his discharge, Torres continued. Intelligence assumed he'd retreated to some remote colony to drink himself to death. Instead, he's been building this operation for 3 years, recruiting disaffected military personnel and acquiring weapons through black market channels. Sarah processed the implications. Webb knew her combat style because they'd served together. He understood fleet operations because he'd helped design them. And his grudge against the military establishment made him particularly dangerous. This wasn't just about profit, but revenge against the system that had cast him out. "The political situation is deteriorating," Torres explained. "Senator Harrison is demanding immediate military action to rescue his daughter and the other prisoners. Earth Command wants to send 3 battle groups to assault the asteroid fortress. Webb is counting on that response. He's turned the entire asteroid field into a killing ground." The holographic display showed Webb's defensive preparations. Automated weapons platforms hidden throughout the field, minefields that could be activated remotely, and fighter squadrons positioned to exploit the predictable approach vectors of large fleet formations. A conventional assault would succeed eventually, but at a cost measured in thousands of lives. "What's the alternative?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Phantom," Torres said simply. "The ghost pilot who appears when conventional forces can't handle the mission. Someone who can infiltrate the fortress, gather intelligence on the prisoner's location, and coordinate a precision rescue before Webb can execute them." Sarah stood and walked to the office viewport, watching civilian ships dock and depart in peaceful routine. Those people trusted that human space would remain safe, that their government could protect them from threats, like the Crimson Fleet. They deserved better than watching their military stumble into an obvious trap. "Webb mentioned he knew who I was," Sarah said finally. "That suggests he's been tracking Phantom's activities, possibly for years. He'll be expecting me to return, which is why this mission is completely voluntary," Torres replied. "I can't order Phantom to do anything, because officially Phantom doesn't exist. Sarah Chen is a retired logistics officer enjoying civilian life on a peaceful station. The choice was hers, as it had always been. Sarah Chen could continue her quiet retirement, reading books and tending her small garden while someone else solved the galaxy's problems. But Phantom existed precisely because some problems required solutions beyond official channels and conventional thinking. "I'll need complete intelligence files on Webb and his known associates," Sarah said, turning back to Torres. "Also access to the experimental stealth technology that Research Division has been developing. If Webb knows my standard tactics, I need capabilities he hasn't seen before." Torres smiled with relief and activated his secure terminal. "Already prepared. Research Division has been waiting for field testing opportunities for their new phase shift technology. Your ship will be effectively invisible to all known sensor types for limited periods." As data files downloaded to Sarah's personal device, she felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling across her shoulders. Another impossible mission. Another chance to prove that human determination could overcome any obstacle. There's one more thing, Torres said quietly. Webb has been broadcasting on open frequencies, taunting Phantom to face him directly. He's making this personal, trying to draw you into a confrontation on his terms. Sarah considered the psychological warfare aspect. Webb wanted her angry, wanted her to make mistakes driven by emotion rather than tactical thinking. But he'd made his own mistake by involving civilians and taking prisoners. That crossed lines that even former military officers should understand. Tell Research Division to have the modifications ready within 12 hours, Sarah said, heading for the door. And Admiral, when this is over, Webb will face trial for his crimes. But first we're bringing those prisoners home. Torres nodded as Sarah left his office. Through the station corridors, civilians went about their daily lives, unaware that their safety depended on the actions of a legend they thought existed only in stories. Sarah Chen faded back into the crowd, but Phantom was already planning the mission that would determine whether human space remained free or fell under the shadow of well-organized chaos. Research Division's modifications to Sarah's fighter transformed it into something beyond conventional understanding. The phase shift generator created a quantum displacement field that rendered the ship partially out of sync with normal spacetime. For brief periods, she could become completely undetectable, invisible to sensors, immune to weapons, effectively a ghost in truth rather than just in name. The technology came with severe limitations. Each phase shift consumed enormous power, restricting her to 5-minute intervals with mandatory cooling periods between uses. The quantum displacement also interfered with her own sensors and weapons, meaning she had to choose between invisibility and combat effectiveness. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, the project's lead scientist, explained the risks as technicians finished the installation. Extended phase shifting could cause molecular destabilization. We've only tested this technology in controlled laboratory conditions. You're essentially volunteering to be our first field test subject. Sarah ran her hands over the modified control panels, feeling the subtle vibrations of the quantum generator warming up. How many people are being held in that asteroid prison? 43 confirmed prisoners, Dr. Kane replied, including Senator Harrison's daughter and some of our finest pilots. Then the risk is acceptable, Sarah said, beginning her pre-flight checks. What's our maximum effective range for quantum communication during phase shift? 0, Dr. Kane admitted. While shifted, you'll be completely isolated from normal spacetime. No communications in or out. No sensor contact with the outside universe. You'll be operating completely alone. The implications were sobering. During phase shift, Phantom would be truly Phantom, cut off from all support, unable to call for backup or coordinate with friendly forces. Any mistakes would be entirely her own to correct. Admiral Torres arrived as Sarah completed her preparations. Long-range reconnaissance shows increased activity around the asteroid fortress. Webb's broadcasting on all frequencies, challenging Phantom to face him in single combat. He's trying to make this about personal honor rather than rescuing prisoners. Sarah sealed her flight suit and activated the ship's systems. Webb always was dramatic, but his psychology is predictable. He needs to prove his superiority over the military that rejected him. That makes him vulnerable to precisely the kind of manipulation he's attempting on me. The launch bay cleared as Sarah's modified fighter powered up. External observation would show a standard patrol ship departing on routine reconnaissance. The quantum modifications were invisible to casual inspection, hidden within the ship's existing systems. As Sarah accelerated toward the Vega sector, she reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Infiltrate the asteroid fortress using phase shift technology, locate and assess the prisoner facilities, identify Webb's command center, and gather intelligence for a precision rescue operation. Secondary objective: gather evidence of Webb's intelligence sources within Earth Command. The 18-hour journey passed in careful preparation. Sarah studied every available detail about the asteroid fortress, memorizing layout patterns, defensive positions, and patrol schedules. Webb's operation showed professional competence, but also the weaknesses of someone who'd been out of active service for 3 years. Approaching the asteroid field's edge, Sarah detected immediate changes from her previous reconnaissance. Fighter patrols had tripled in number, automated defense platforms were operating at maximum sensitivity, and new sensor arrays swept space with overlapping coverage patterns. Webb was clearly expecting Phantom's return. Sarah activated the phase shift generator for the first time in combat conditions. Reality flickered around her as the quantum field engaged, and suddenly the asteroid field appeared different, muted, somehow less substantial. Her ship's sensors showed only quantum static, but her visual observation remained clear. Moving through the defensive perimeter felt like swimming through a dream. Pirate fighters passed within meters of her ship without reacting, their sensors unable to detect her shifted presence. Automated weapons platforms tracked empty space while she drifted past their firing solutions. The prison complex appeared before her after 20 minutes of careful maneuvering. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, Sarah could see the captured pilots in their cramped cells. Many showed signs of interrogation, but all appeared alive and relatively healthy. Webb was keeping them intact for a reason, likely as leverage for future negotiations or recruitment attempts. Phase shift ended as the quantum generator reached its thermal limit, leaving Sarah temporarily visible in the heart of the fortress complex. She immediately maneuvered into the shadow of a cargo asteroid, using its bulk to mask her signature while the generator cooled. During the waiting period, Sarah observed the fortress's central command facility, a heavily modified asteroid with multiple communication arrays, defensive turrets, and what appeared to be a personal fighter bay. Webb's command center, almost certainly, but heavily defended and positioned to respond quickly to any threat. The quantum generator reached operational temperature as Sarah detected movement in the prisoner complex. Guards were rotating shifts, providing a brief window of reduced surveillance. She activated phase shift again and maneuvered closer to the facility. What she discovered in the guard rotation pattern chilled her. The security procedures were identical to those used in high-security military installations, procedures that were classified and changed regularly. Webb's intelligence source wasn't just providing information about convoy routes and patrol schedules. Someone was giving him access to current operational security protocols. Sarah documented everything her ship's passive sensors could detect while maintaining phase shift: guard positions, communication frequencies, prisoner locations, and most importantly, the sophisticated security measures that proved Webb's continued access to classified military information. As she prepared to withdraw and report her findings, an alert sounded throughout the fortress complex, not a detection alarm. Webb's forces had finally spotted something that concerned them. Through her ship's enhanced optics, Sarah saw the approaching threat. 3 Earth Command battle groups, exactly as Admiral Torres had predicted the politicians would demand. Hundreds of ships moving in traditional formation toward the asteroid field, following precisely the kind of conventional assault pattern that Webb's defenses were designed to counter. Sarah faced an impossible choice. She could retreat with the intelligence she'd gathered and let the military assault proceed as planned, accepting the massive casualties that would result, or she could break communication silence, warn the approaching fleet about the trap, and sacrifice her covert mission to save lives. The decision crystallized as Webb's voice echoed across all communication frequencies, broadcast to both his forces and the approaching fleet. "Welcome to the Vega system, Admiral Stevens. I've been expecting you, and I've been especially expecting your phantom pilot, who I'm sure is somewhere in this asteroid field right now, watching our reunion." Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the voice responding to Webb's transmission. Admiral Stevens, the commanding officer of the battle groups, was the same Admiral Stevens who'd served as Webb's executive officer during the Zarathi campaign. The same Stevens who had access to all current operational security protocols. The trap was bigger than anyone suspected. Webb didn't just have a source inside Earth Command, he had turned one of their most trusted admirals. The approaching battle groups weren't riding to rescue the prisoners. They were being led into a carefully orchestrated massacre by someone they trusted completely. Sarah's finger hovered over the communication controls as 3 battle groups flew deeper into the killing ground. She could save them, but only by revealing everything and watching Webb escape with the prisoners. Or she could maintain her cover and watch hundreds of ships die in a trap that could have been avoided. The weight of command settled on her shoulders as it had so many times before. Time to find out if legends were strong enough to carry impossible choices. Sarah watched in horror as Admiral Stevens led the 3 battle groups deeper into the asteroid field, following a formation pattern that would maximize casualties when Webb's trap activated. 200 ships carrying 15,000 crew members, all trusting their commanding officer to bring them home safely. The communication channels filled with standard fleet chatter, status reports, formation adjustments, the casual conversation of professional military personnel preparing for combat. None of them suspected that their admiral was guiding them toward a carefully prepared killing ground. Sarah's tactical analysis painted a grim picture. Webb had positioned his forces to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously, using the asteroids as cover and launching platforms. The battle groups were following approach vectors that would funnel them into concentrated fire zones where their numerical advantage would become a liability, but revealing the trap meant sacrificing the prisoners and allowing Webb to escape. The captured pilots would die. Senator Harrison's daughter would become a propaganda tool, and the Crimson Fleet would relocate to another system where the cycle would begin again, unless there was a third option. Sarah activated her ship's recording systems and began documenting everything. Stevens's communication with Webb, the trap's positioning, the evidence of insider knowledge that could only come from someone with access to classified battle plans. If she couldn't prevent the massacre, she could at least ensure that justice followed. Admiral Stevens, Webb's voice carried across the communication frequencies. Your fleet appears to be following the standard assault pattern outlined in current Earth Command tactical doctrine. How fortunate that I've had access to those documents for review. Stevens' response came with practiced military precision. Colonel Webb, this is your final opportunity to surrender. Release the prisoners and submit to lawful authority. You cannot win against 3 battle groups. Perhaps not, Webb replied, his amusement evident. But I can inflict casualties that will make Earth Command reconsider their aggressive expansion policies. Unless, of course, a certain phantom pilot interferes with our proceedings. Sarah realized that Webb was forcing her to choose between saving the fleet or maintaining her covert mission. He knew she was listening, knew she would have to break cover to prevent the massacre. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated. Webb had studied Phantom's operational history and identified the one weakness that could be exploited. Phantom never abandoned people who needed help. Sarah made her decision with the cold calculation that had made her legendary. She would save both the fleet and the prisoners, but it required accepting risks that bordered on suicidal. She activated the phase shift generator and maneuvered toward Webb's command asteroid. If Stevens was feeding information to the Crimson Fleet, eliminating Webb might cause enough confusion to disrupt the trap. The prisoners would still need rescue, but at least the fleet might survive. The quantum displacement field engaged as Sarah approached the heavily defended command center. Reality shifted around her as she became invisible to normal space-time, passing through defensive fire that couldn't target what didn't technically exist. Webb's personal fighter bay appeared before her as phase shift ended. Sarah had perhaps 3 minutes before the quantum generator needed another cooling cycle. Time enough for one precise strike if she calculated everything perfectly. The bay's atmospheric shields were designed to repel physical objects, not quantum-shifted matter. Sarah's ship materialized inside the facility like a ghost becoming solid, her weapons already charging for the attack that would end Webb's operation. But the bay was empty. No command ship, no personal fighter, no sign that Webb had ever been present. Sarah had been drawn into a subsidiary trap, while the real threat remained hidden elsewhere in the complex. Impressive technology. Phantom. Webb's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. Quantum phase shifting. I didn't think Earth Command had progressed that far. You've just provided valuable intelligence about military research capabilities. Sarah realized her mistake. Webb had anticipated her infiltration attempt and used it to gather information about classified technology. Every move she made was being analyzed, recorded, and transmitted to whoever was coordinating with the Crimson Fleet. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the asteroid field as Webb's trap activated. The battle groups found themselves under attack from multiple directions simultaneously, their formation advantage negated by the complex three-dimensional battlefield. Explosions blossomed among the fleet as ships died under concentrated fire. Sarah activated phase shift again and accelerated toward the main battle area. She couldn't save every ship, but she could disrupt the attack pattern enough to give the fleet a fighting chance. Emerging from quantum displacement in the middle of the firefight, Sarah's ship appeared like an avenging angel among the chaos. Her first salvo destroyed a hidden weapons platform that had been targeting a damaged cruiser. Her second attack eliminated a squadron of fighters that were closing for a killing run on a troop ship. "All ships, this is Phantom," Sarah broadcast on emergency frequencies. "Admiral Stevens has been compromised. He is working with the enemy. Do not follow his tactical orders. Break formation and execute individual evasive maneuvers." The accusation sent shockwaves through the fleet communication channels. Accusations of treason weren't made lightly, especially against flag officers with distinguished service records. Stevens's response was immediate and predictable. "All ships ignore the unknown transmission. Maintain formation and continue the assault." That is a direct order from Fleet Command. Sarah found herself fighting a battle on multiple fronts, engaging Webb's forces while trying to convince the fleet that their commander was a traitor. Some ships began breaking formation, their captains trusting Phantom's legendary reputation over official orders. Others maintained their positions, torn between duty and survival. The confusion in the fleet's ranks gave Webb's forces additional advantages. Ships that broke formation became isolated targets, while ships that maintained formation continued following Stevens into the killing zones. Sarah realized she needed proof that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. She accelerated toward Stevens's flagship, dodging defensive fire from ships that thought they were protecting their admiral from an unknown attacker. The flagship's communication arrays were heavily defended, but Sarah's ship was designed for precision work in hostile environments. She maneuvered through the defensive fire and deployed a quantum recorder that would capture all communications entering or leaving the ship. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears. Stevens wasn't just feeding information to Webb. He was actively coordinating the attack, providing real-time tactical updates that allowed the Crimson Fleet to anticipate every fleet movement. "Admiral Stevens," Sarah broadcast on an open channel that both fleets could monitor, "explain why your ship is transmitting encrypted communications to Crimson Fleet frequencies." The silence that followed spoke volumes. Stevens's betrayal was now exposed for both fleets to witness, but the damage had already been done. Dozens of ships were burning in the asteroid field, their crews dead or dying because they'd trusted their commanding officer. Webb's laughter echoed across the communication channels. "Congratulations, Phantom. You've uncovered my inside source, but the tactical situation remains unchanged. Your fleet is still trapped, and my prisoners are still my leverage." Sarah checked her ship's status as quantum generator warnings flashed across her console. The phase shift technology was approaching critical overload from extended use. One more quantum displacement cycle might be possible, but it would likely destroy the ship's reactor. Time for the most important decision of her career. She could use the last phase shift to escape and report Stevens's betrayal, ensuring justice but abandoning the fleet and prisoners. Or she could make one final impossible attempt to save everyone. Phantom had never abandoned people who needed help, even if it meant destroying herself in the process. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the scattered fleet, burning ships, and the prison complex still holding 43 captives. The quantum generator was past its safety limits. Reactor warnings flashed red across her console, and Webb's forces were closing in from all directions. Any rational pilot would retreat and live to fight another day, but Phantom had never been rational. "All ships still capable of maneuvering," Sarah broadcast on the emergency frequency. "Form up on my position. We're going to end this." Captain Rodriguez of the heavy cruiser Defiant was the first to respond. "Phantom, this is Captain Rodriguez. My ship is heavily damaged but still operational. What's your plan?" Other voices joined the channel as surviving ships began rallying around the legendary call sign. The psychological effect was immediate. Crews that had been demoralized by Stevens's betrayal found new hope in following someone they'd heard about in stories. "The prison complex is our primary objective," Sarah explained while maneuvering toward the asteroid containing the captured pilots. "We rescue our people first, then deal with Webb's forces. Be advised, my ship is equipped with experimental technology that may cause unusual sensor readings." Sarah activated the phase shift generator for what would likely be the final time. The quantum field engaged with dangerous fluctuations that sent alarms cascading through her ship's systems. Reality flickered as she became invisible to normal space-time. But the displacement felt unstable, threatening to collapse at any moment. She materialized inside the prison complex's main corridor, her ship somehow occupying the same space as the facility's structure without collision. The quantum displacement had created a temporary overlap between her vessel and the asteroid, a phenomenon that Dr. Kane's theory suggested was possible, but extremely dangerous. The facility's automated systems couldn't process what their sensors were detecting. Security doors unlocked as the computer system tried to categorize an object that registered as both present and absent simultaneously. Sarah used the confusion to access the prisoner release controls. 43 cell doors opened simultaneously as Sarah's ship began solid materialization. The quantum overlap was collapsing, and she had seconds before the ship would either solidify completely or be torn apart by molecular destabilization. All prisoners, this is Phantom, she broadcast on the facility's internal communication system. Emergency evacuation in progress. Report to Escape Pod Base 7 immediately. The captured pilots needed no additional encouragement. Led by Senator Harrison's daughter, Captain Lisa Harrison, they moved through the corridors with military precision toward the designated evacuation point. Sarah's ship completed materialization just as Webb's security forces arrived. The firefight that followed was brief but intense, with Sarah's superior piloting allowing her to maneuver through the facility's tight spaces while the prison guards struggled to coordinate their response. She reached the escape pod bay as the last prisoners sealed themselves into the evacuation vessels. All pods away, Captain Harrison reported. Phantom, we owe you more than we can ever repay. Get those pods to friendly ships, Sarah replied, her own vessel already showing signs of quantum destabilization. I still have business with the Red Baron. The escape pods launched as Sarah's fighter exited the prison complex through a breach she'd blasted in the asteroid's hull. Outside, the battle between Webb's forces and the loyal fleet ships continued with devastating intensity. Admiral Stevens's flagship was burning, its communication arrays destroyed by ships under Captain Rodriguez's command. The traitorous admiral's voice no longer coordinated enemy attacks, giving the loyal forces a fighting chance. But Webb's own voice cut through the communication chaos with cold satisfaction. Impressive rescue, Phantom. But you've destroyed your experimental ship's reactor in the process. Those quantum fluctuations I'm reading suggest you have perhaps 5 minutes before catastrophic failure. Sarah checked her ship's status and confirmed Webb's assessment. The quantum generator was in uncontrolled overload. Reactor containment was failing, and multiple systems were shutting down to prevent total destruction. She had time for one final action before the ship became uninhabitable. Webb, she broadcast on the channel he'd been using for his taunts. You wanted to face Phantom directly. Here's your chance. Personal combat, single ships, winner takes everything. The challenge hung in the communication spectrum for long moments before Webb responded. Accepted. But I choose the battlefield, the asteroid field's central nexus, where your quantum technology will be useless and you'll face me with pure piloting skill. Sarah knew it was a trap, but she also knew Webb's psychology. His need to prove superiority over the military establishment required personal victory over Phantom. He would fight fairly because anything else would diminish his moment of triumph. The central nexus was a region where multiple asteroids created a complex maze of gravitational fields and debris. Sarah's ship limped toward the location, while Webb's fighter approached from the opposite direction, both vessels silhouetted against the burning wrecks of the larger battle. Webb's ship was a work of art, a custom fighter incorporating technology from multiple sources, armed with the finest weapons available on the black market. Sarah's vessel, by contrast, was falling apart around her, held together by emergency repairs and sheer determination. You know, Sarah, Webb said, using her real name for the first time, we could have been allies. Your tactical brilliance combined with my strategic vision could have reshaped human space. Human space doesn't need reshaping, Sarah replied, weapons charging for the final engagement. It needs protecting from people like you. The dogfight that followed was a masterpiece of piloting skill and tactical thinking. Webb's superior ship and weapons were balanced by Sarah's experience and intimate knowledge of asteroid field combat. They danced between floating rocks and debris fields, each seeking the perfect shot that would end the encounter. Sarah's dying ship took multiple hits, but her return fire was precise and devastating. She used the gravitational fields to impossible advantage, turning Webb's own momentum against him and forcing him into vulnerable positions. The end came suddenly. Webb, overconfident in his superior technology, attempted a head-on attack that relied on his ship's heavier armor. Sarah's response was a technique she'd perfected during the Zarathi Wars, a seemingly suicidal charge that ended with both ships passing within meters of each other. Webb's ship continued forward for several seconds before exploding in a brilliant flash. Sarah's final shot had found the reactor containment system with surgical precision. Sarah's own ship was dying around her as she limped toward the loyal fleet. The quantum generator finally exploded, taking most of her engine systems with it. Emergency power was failing, life support was compromised, and the ship's structure was buckling under stress it was never designed to handle. Phantom, this is Captain Rodriguez. The communication channel crackled with static. We've got recovery ships en route to your position. Can you maintain life support for another 10 minutes? Sarah checked her systems and smiled despite everything. Affirmative, Defiant. Phantom will be ready for pickup. As the rescue ship approached, Sarah reflected on the mission's cost. Stevens would face court-martial for treason. The Crimson Fleet was scattered without its leader, and 43 prisoners were free. But dozens of ships had been lost, hundreds of crew members were dead, and the galaxy was reminded that heroism often came with terrible prices. The rescue ship's tractor beam engaged as Sarah's fighter finally lost all power. Through the viewport, she could see civilian ships beginning to return to the Vega trade routes, merchants and colonists resuming their lives because someone had stood between them and chaos. Sarah Chen would return to Station Omega-7 to complete her official report, detailing Admiral Stevens's betrayal and the Crimson Fleet's defeat. The woman in the logistics office would be commended for her insight and thoroughness, but Phantom's legend would grow in the telling, as legends always do. Young pilots would speak of the ghost who appeared when hope seemed lost, who fought impossible odds and always found a way to protect the innocent. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with threats that conventional forces couldn't always handle. But somewhere in the crowds of ordinary citizens, legends waited for the moment when the universe demanded the impossible, and sometimes, when everything depended on someone willing to risk everything for others, those legends answered the call.